All right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Jean Merrill. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm Director of Inclusion at the NCAA National Office. I'd like to welcome each of you to this virtual inclusion forum that's going to be focused on common ground. And before I introduce my colleagues who serve on the Common Ground leadership team, I'd like to take a moment for a couple of acknowledgements. First of all, this is a really painful, angry, aching, and raw time for our country. For Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, these feelings have resided in them since white European feet first stepped on Native American soil. For Black Americans specifically, their American reality began when 20 enslaved Africans were cargoed from Point Comfort in Virginia in 1619 and sold to English colonists. And so it began. And so here we are today. More than 400 years of slavery by different names and cloaked with different disguises. Slavery, of course, indentured servitude, Jim Crow, redlining, the war on drugs, stop and frisk, mass incarceration. These are all upheld and condoned by white folks like me who either outright supported these manifestations of racism or simply did not know how to speak up. And so here we are today. Black, Brown, and Indigenous people are saying, here we go again. And white people are saying, I can't believe this happened. But it did happen. And white people like me, we must finally start believing that these racist injustices happen every day in our communities of color, including in our LGBTQ communities of color. Even when videos don't allow us the microscopic proof of injustice that we had with George Floyd's torture and death, they are happening. To our Black friends and family members and neighbors, colleagues, and loved ones, and to all people of color across this country and around the world, please know that the Common Ground leadership team stands in solidarity with you. We cry with you. We remain hopeful with you, and we are committed to working for the rest of our lives in the name of peace, justice, fairness, and happiness. Secondly, I'd like to acknowledge how disappointed our entire Common Ground leadership team is that we weren't able to join you in Denver for the Inclusion Forum a few weeks ago. We all grieve the monumental loss around the world, across our campuses, and within our families caused by COVID-19. And that grief is felt particularly acute these last few weeks. If you've personally been impacted, perhaps by sickness, loss of a loved one, loss of employment, or your mental health has taken a toll, know that we are with you. Please take good care of yourself and your loved ones and seek support in any way you can. With that, I'd like to welcome you to a panel discussion about Common Ground. The Common Ground Initiative was established in 2014 to provide LGBTQ individuals and individuals of faith at public and private NCAA member institutions, LGBTQ organizations, and faith-based organizations an opportunity to discuss commonalities and differences and to learn how to work more cohesively within athletics. The main goal of Common Ground and its initiatives is to foster athletics environments that respect and support the dignity and well-being of student athletes and those who teach and lead them. Since 2014, there have been 5 Common Ground events. The first 2 were held at the NCAA National Office in Indianapolis, but beginning with Common Ground 3, they were hosted by some of our member institutions. In 2017, Common Ground 3 was held at Houghton College, a Division III institution affiliated with the Wesleyan Church. In 2018, Common Ground 4 was held at Brigham Young University, a Division I institution affiliated with the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints. And last fall, Common Ground 5 was the first time to be held at a public institution at the University of Texas at Austin. Each of these annual events are conducted over the course of 2 days and nights and are masterfully facilitated by one of our own leadership team members, Tanya Williams, who's the founder of Authentic Coaching and Consulting. You should Google her. Over the course of those 2 days, there are countless reflective and interactive exercises to learn about various LGBTQ and faith identities, experiences, and beliefs, to identify motivations and challenges to finding common ground, to strategize action steps to take back to a campus or a conference office, and to build a network of peers who are pursuing the same goals. These activities include one-on-one conversations and pair shares with people who may not share the same perspective around faith and LGBTQ inclusion, large group conversations with people who share similar identities and beliefs, and conversations with people who may not share those same beliefs. It's all done in the spirit of storytelling, listening, and finding areas of commonality and empathy. It's emotionally exhausting, it's challenging, it's tear-filled, but just as present are the commitments to humanity, to understanding, to friendship, and to hope that despite identity, despite belief, despite perspective, we can all make the experiences of all of our student athletes and those who teach them meaningful and empowering. The annual two-day event is not the only thing the Common Ground leadership team does. This group of people has met every other week for years and is constantly trying to advance the spirit of Common Ground. And that's what brings us here today. So over the next hour, my colleagues will focus their discussion around how to move from personal transformation to institutional action, such as programming and policy change when it comes to Common Ground. So in the order in which they'll be speaking, and if we can go ahead and put up the next slide, I'd like to introduce my colleagues who are on the leadership team and I'll be meeting with you here over the course of this hour. Gary Pine is the Director of Athletics at Azusa Pacific University. He'll speak to you about the value of personal transformation. Liz Darger is Senior Associate AD and Senior Woman Administrator at Brigham Young University, who will discuss institutional action. Skip Lord, Executive Director of Athletics Engagement at Houghton College, will discuss the value of reasonable conversation and building relationships in a polarized culture. Chris Mosier, a Team USA athlete and founder of transathlete.com, will speak about challenges facing student-athlete participants. Nevin Capel, founder of Return on Inclusion, will discuss the benefits of student athletes. And Pat Griffin, Professor Emerita at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, will describe the Common Ground format for our upcoming 2021 Common Ground. Hopefully we'll have about 20-25 minutes at the end for question and answer. So I would encourage you, as questions come to mind over the course of the presentation, that you submit your questions through the Q&A function. These will be submitted anonymously, so I want to make sure you're aware of that. And lastly, before I turn it over to Gary, I want to just note for everyone who's joining us today, in full transparency, this webinar is being recorded and we will be posting it on our website in a few days. So with that, I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, Gary Pine.
Thank you, Jean, and welcome everybody to this unique venue in terms of talking Common Ground. I want to thank you for being here. And I will speak for about 4 minutes about a personal transformation. I'm not sure you can sum up everything that's happened in a matter of 4 minutes, but I want you to understand the impact of Common Ground and what has happened, at least personally for me. Give you a little bit of background on who I am. I'm at Azusa Pacific University, an NCAA Division II school in Southern California. Azusa Pacific is a Christian university where all of our employees do sign statements of faith. Not all of our students would identify though as Christians, although I would guess 85 to 90% of our students say they are Christians. I'm going to use a term that I have wrestled with whether to say in this forum, but I'm going to say it here and then define it, because I want you to understand who I am and my background. But I probably would identify myself as an evangelical Christian, not in a political sense. And I do distance myself from those who would use that term in a political way or have abused the term. But in the sense that my faith, tradition, and history follows very closely in line with what evangelical Christianity has been, in terms of that I do view the Bible with authority and relevance into my life. I do see Jesus Christ, or Jesus of Nazareth, as purely as uniquely human and uniquely divine. And I do see the Bible as relevant and with authority in my life, and that, as Jesus said, no one comes to God except through him. Now, having said that and identified kind of where I am and where I come from, I am clearly willing to admit that evangelicals have not been always great ambassadors of Jesus's message. And in one of those areas has been an area of judgment. in an area of exclusion. And I would say that has been very true for me for much of my life. I lived in such a way that if I saw you to be different in your values or different in your expressions of how you lived your life, that I would not engage with you. In fact, I wouldn't engage with you until I would deem that you had your life in order. And I think that was true. That has been true for a lot of evangelicals, and still true to this day. I don't believe that is taught in Scripture. That is a cultural thing that I think has been passed down through the years. I also think that evangelicals carry with them this thought that I need to change somebody, or I need to change people. I don't think that is also an accurate description and depiction of what is taught in Scripture. It's not my job to change anybody. I believe it's the Holy Spirit's job to change people. But as I entered into this common ground endeavor 6 years ago in 2014, I must admit I entered with a lot of trepidation, scared that I would be attacked for being a Christian, but also fearful because I did not understand people in the LGBTQ world, communities. In fact, I didn't have any friends at that point in time who would self-identify as gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender. And yet today, as I come through this 6 years later, some of my dearest friends are people in the LGBT community. The transformation has centered around an area of listening and engaging through conversation and leaving emotion as best as I could at the doorstep. I'm not sure I knew that strategy as I went into it, but I engaged in a way that I did want to understand and I did want to learn, and I didn't want to come across judgmental, nor did I want to say, I'm going to change you. In fact, if anything I've learned, I'm not going to change anybody. A transformational moment as I was going through this was trying to educate myself. And I was reading everything that I could read to understand the conflict and the differences. And I came across an article in which 2 Ivy League professors did a study on why do people change and how do they change. And the study indicated that we change our mind hundreds, if not thousands of times every day. You know, am I going to sit here or sit there? Am I going to go down this street or that street? Am I going to read this book or that article? But when it comes to change about who we are and how we identify ourselves, those changes come very slowly, if at all. And what they discovered is they did come through conversation, that it wasn't through persuasion of arguments or through emotional exercises of dialogue. It was just simple conversation and a matter of learning. And I would say that was true of me. As I entered the first common ground, I remember I was going to drive my stake in the ground and I was not going to change, and I was going to change people who didn't think like me. But yet as I left that first common ground and as I was flying back to California, I remember saying, I said, Lord God, what are you doing to me? Because I was so overwhelmed by the changes I was going to need to make in my life as I began to understand and begin to develop friendships with people in the LGBT community. I'm going to close with this, in that I have a verse from the Bible that's framed in my office. It's a verse that I learned back in high school, but that has become very relevant to me in the last 10 years, and particularly in the last 6 years. And it comes from the book of James. And James was the brother of Jesus. And in James chapter 1, verse 19, he says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And I think in everything that we are going through right now, and in particular for people who have different viewpoints on life, we have that backwards. We're quick to get angry, we're quick to shout, and then we listen. If there's one thing I've learned through Common Ground is the value and the power of listening to others' voices and understanding the path that they are walking. With that, I want to pass this off to my friend, colleague, the Senior Women Administrator and Associate Athletic Director at BYU, Liz Darger, who is going to talk to us about institutional action.
Thank you so much, Gary. I work at BYU. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. I also want to acknowledge what's going on in our country, and I hope that some of the principles we talk about today you'll feel are very applicable to any of our common ground conversations that we're having. As I talk a little bit about BYU, I also want to acknowledge that at BYU we have a lot of room for improvement. But I also am really pleased with the progress that we're making on our campus and becoming more inclusive in the conversations, the important dialogue that is happening. But we have a lot of room for improvement, like we all do. But I am pleased with the conversations that we're having. I attended Common Ground 2 in 2016, didn't know anyone and was scared to death. And I left that 2-day experience absolutely transformed. And when I was making on the very last activity was making an action items list of what we wanted to do when we went back to campus. And as I was making my list, I put on many of the same things that I'm sure others did about finding allies across campus and talking to decision makers, hopefully reporting back to my athletic director and our president. And really my big #1 pie in the sky action item would be if we could form a working group or a task force or a committee, because I knew if that happened, then this would be something that a conversation that would continue. It wouldn't just be a one-time activity or a one-time conversation, but something that would hopefully be more long-term. And so in going back to BYU, I did have the opportunity to present to my boss, our athletic director, and also the president of my school. And I remember preparing and being very nervous, thinking, I don't know how to PowerPoint this transformational experience I've just been through. And I hope all of you are familiar with, there's some incredible articles written from Champion Magazine about the Common Ground experience. If you haven't read those, I would really strongly encourage you to read those. They give a very good picture of what the Common Ground experience is like. My colleague just said, tell the story of your experience at Common Ground. And I'm so glad that I did that. And in having those conversations with my athletic director and our president, I was really grateful for the response, which included forming a working group on our campus to listen to and better understand the experience of our LGBTQ students on our campus, and also included us inviting Dr. Amy Wilson, who is the managing director of inclusion at the NCAA, for her to come visit our campus and help us across, not just in athletics, but across campus, of what we could do. In terms of athletics, some things that since that first Common Ground meeting that we've been able to do, we have a SAC subcommittee for diversity and inclusion. And it only had 3 members when it started, but one of the neat activities that they put together in 2018 was a modified privilege activity. And if you search on YouTube, BYU Athletics, BU 2018, you can find a video of that activity. But one of the things we found in putting that activity together was the strength of our student athletes leading the way. And we as administrators offering institutional support and guidance and help and resources, but really letting our student athletes lead out and recognizing then that other students wanted to get involved because they saw the student athletes leading out in that. We've included diversity and inclusion yearly trainings with our teams. We have a non-discrimination statement and a fan code of conduct and some other things in athletics that we continue to work on to try and create a more inclusive athletic department. With that campus working group, it included weekly meetings with our LGBTQ students, hearing about their experience. And one of the most poignant thing that came out of that was just the opportunity for administrators, high-level administrators on campus, many of whom who are in decision-making positions, to get proximate to students. Brian Stevenson came and visited our campus and gave a forum address in 2018, and he talked about the importance of getting proximate. And so that's something at BYU we continue to talk about. And it feels like often the higher up you get in administration, the less proximate you are to students. By having that working group, it provided an opportunity for our high-level administrators to get proximate to our LGBTQ students, to hear their stories, to better understand their experience. We've been able to create 2 new positions on our campus. One is an assistant to the president for student success and inclusion that sits on President's Council, and also an inclusion counselor. And then in 2018, we were able to host Common Ground 4. We are not perfect. We have a long way to go. And there are a lot of barriers in terms of how to solve problems. One of the barriers is that sometimes it can feel like you can take one step forward and two steps back. Frustrations come. Being on a religious campus, there are very strongly held religious beliefs. I'm a person of faith, and as Gary talked so well about, we were talking about people's core identities. Nevin and Gary talk a lot about this, about what we're talking about, core identities, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion. The conversations will be hard and sensitive. And so it can be difficult on an institutional level to have those conversations and to change culture. But again, one of the things that we have found, the importance of high-level administrators getting proximate to students and hearing their stories to better understand their lived experience. At some campuses, I think the athletic department is ahead of the rest of campus, and at other campuses, the campus is way ahead of the athletic department. We have been really grateful at BYU to partner with the athletic department and campus together to work on initiatives together. And there are some things in the athletic department that we may be a few steps ahead on, but then we can work with campus to try and see what we can do on a campus level. There are lots of things vying for the attention of administrators these days. These conversations are important. With what is happening in our country, we all know the importance of truly understanding our student athletes and their experience, truly looking to understand those that have a different lived experience than our own, and doing everything we can, especially using our privilege, whether it's because of positions of authority, because of our race, because of our religion, because of our sexual orientation, using our privilege to make things better for all of our student athletes. And so I would encourage you, as you continue to learn more about Common Ground, to think through what you can do as action items, what you can do to look into perhaps becoming more involved in this Common Ground discussion and other discussions of social justice on your campus. And now I will kick it over to my good colleague and good friend, Skip Lord.
Good afternoon, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. As Liz mentioned, I serve at Houghton College, and my preferred pronouns are he, him, and his. Heading from the deep personal change that Gary so movingly talked about to the significant, well-organized institutional change that Liz is helping to lead at BYU requires a plan. It won't just happen. It's not as simple as attending Common Ground, checking the box, and considering your job finished. In my earlier years, I spent many decades coaching. We all know the depth of the relationships between a coach and their players, or at least the potential for that relationship. Some of my closest friends today are former players. I know that over the years, some of those players felt comfortable enough to come and talk to me about their sexual orientation or other issues, but I also know that there were others who didn't. I often wonder what I could have done differently to help those student athletes know that I cared about them, God loved them, and things are going to be all right. There's an old song that says, I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger. I won't try to sing that for you, but it's easier to say it when you say it to the beat. I don't have time today to go into detail about how much I've learned over the last 6 years through my involvement with Common Ground, but I can testify that it has been a life-changing ride. I look forward with anticipation to what's next, and I strongly encourage you to jump in with both feet. Why you? Why me? Our divided country is in a desperate need of people who care deeply about others, people who want to build bridges and make this a better place for everyone, people who unify. This isn't an easy task. It requires building deep relationships with people who are different from us. In a world that pits us against them, whether the differences are related to race, politics, age, economics, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, or any of the multitude of other things that divide us. This is countercultural, to say the least. If you are one of those caring people who knows that we can do this better, I want to invite you to apply to participate in the next Common Ground initiative. Go to the Office of Inclusion webpage and read the annual reports that Liz mentioned that describe Common Grounds 1 through 5. Read through the lists of suggested action steps and take time to ask yourself which, if any of these things, are happening already on our campus. Which could? Why or why not? Could I make a difference? Am I willing to sit and persist in conversation with people whom I have profound differences on important topics? Common Ground tries to break down polarization by building relationships that enable us to improve the educational experience for everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, or religion, in ways that don't compromise anyone's core values. That kind of communication can only happen if we commit the time required to build deep relationships. One of the strengths of this leadership team is the commitment we've made to stay at the table, even in the midst of some of those tough conversations. Most of us didn't come to this work as friends, but we've stayed long enough to become friends and to begin the hard work of making progress. When I started this work in 2014, I had very few close friends who were LGBTQ. Now I consider myself blessed to have many dear friends from that community. I've also learned that the things we have in common are more numerous by far than the things that divide us. It's relatively easy to talk about theoretical issues. It's another thing altogether to do the hard work of developing and implementing real-life policies and best practices that positively impact how our friends experience life. I'll now pass this on to my colleague and friend, Chris Mosier from Team USA and transathlete.com. Chris?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Skip. So, hi, everyone. My name is Chris Mosier. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I am going to be talking about the challenges that face student athletes in attending Common Ground. I guess the great thing about this is that my section will be very short because as I came up with challenges, I kept coming up with positive parts. And as I was writing them out, I realized that I was actually taking all of Nevin's material. So I will draw back to the challenges. There are some challenges, some very real challenges that are worthy of mentioning. But as I said, they kind of eventually shift into positive or benefits. So I think that that's a great point. One issue that student athletes face, or maybe first I should frame this up in saying one of the great things. Sorry, Nevin, I have to do this one. One of the great things about Common Ground is that we are all there for the students. So every single coach, administrator, person in that room is there with the best interest of students in mind. And so with that, we all have that common framework to start, which is a beautiful thing. So students entering into that space actually have a lot of power. With that, there's this huge moment and this opportunity for learning, which can be really overwhelming for our student athletes. So when we are giving our student athletes the tools to learn about discrimination, to learn about difference, to have these meaningful, impactful conversations, and the terminology and just the ways to sit in conversation, in community with other people, it's a lot for students to process. When we add on all of the things that they are personally unpacking at the same time. So we have had student athletes come in and become overwhelmed with all of the information as they're processing their own experience, whatever their background is or their family situation, or as they're reflecting on the experiences of friends. It can become a little bit overwhelming. And we found a lot of benefit in having a wellness person in the room to do checks and just have somebody that folks can talk to. It was mentioned earlier that it is emotionally challenging, and I'll second that in saying there are a lot of raw emotions that come up when we have the opportunity to be heard, to be seen, and to see others who are both like us and not like us. And so we see folks, not just students, but we see many attendees sort of go through this process of recognition, of realization, of feeling seen, and of feeling all of the emotions that sort of come along with that as they process some of their history and some of their past traumas. A positive part that sort of becomes a challenge is that our student athletes are hopeful and they are optimistic. And so that is a wonderful thing to have. But in order for change to happen when these students go back to their campus, they need to have a support team. And so one challenge is making sure that we have allies at school to support these student athletes in the change that they want to create when they make it back. So we have some strategies that Pat will discuss potentially, and you'll see in the information about the upcoming Common Ground about how we intend to make sure that those student athletes are supported. But it is important to keep in mind that our students today want to create change. They want to be a part of moving our world forward in a way that has meaningful dialogue and conversations and experiences and community. So we want to make sure that we are equipping them with the tools to support them so that they don't feel like they are on an island. With that, I'm actually going to just allow more space for all of the awesome things about Common Ground and our student athletes. So I'm going to kick it over to my colleague and friend, Nevin Capel.
Thank you, Chris. And I appreciate you bringing in the light as well. So, hi, my name is Nevin Capel. My pronouns are she, her. I want to say happy Pride to everyone. I think it's important that we celebrate, where we are as a community in terms of, our identity. And I feel like it's important to make sure, be reminded that we've worked hard to get to this point. So happy Pride. Just as important as we're celebrating, it's also important to recognize that we are in the midst of a pandemic, which is really disproportionately affecting communities of color. And we're also, among one of the largest uprisings to fight anti-Black racism in recent decades. So, I only say this to start with the student athlete in mind. And we can only imagine the effect that this must be having on student athletes who identify as both Black and LGBTQ. And I've actually talked to several over the past few days who want to be able to celebrate, but they feel like they're carrying the weight of a broken spirit. So, as we're talking about the things that are going well, it's important also, remember some of the experiences that the young people are having day in and day out. With that said, I am so grateful for this leadership team. They have become kind of a family of sorts to me. And this group, especially my dear friend and mentor, Pat Griffin, has been very intentional about making sure that Common Ground is reflective of the diverse athletic community that we have. So, making sure that there's differences across race, gender, orientation, gender identity. And as a result, it's really helped create an environment that we hope we can model even at the institutional level as we start to think about, what we're doing in that space. A lot of the student athletes are able to come in and really build relationships with peers, with coaches, with administrators. And I think most importantly, they're able to let their guard down, which is great because they don't often get the opportunity to do that either on campus or in their respective communities. And I think the openness and willingness that many of the student athletes have just in sharing their stories and being vulnerable, a willingness to be able to participate in exercises that are really centered around their experiences to help coaches and administrators who they don't even know understand, what the needs are in the space is really powerful. I think to Chris's point, even figuring out, how we can take that experience and help them on their campuses is kind of that next step, which Pat's going to get to a little later. The one thing I do want to share was an experience that I did have with a young woman who attended, and she pulled me aside in the bathroom during the last Common Ground, and she was in tears. And at first I'm like, oh no, what's going on? Did something happen? And she just looked at me and she said, I didn't know a place like this existed for someone like me. And when we think about the trauma and the pain of never quite feeling like you belong, and how it just eats away at the spirit, there's just so many young people that need us. And, we stand here or sit here among you virtually just sharing their stories. But, in everything we do, we got to think about how to bring their voices into the room, because they need us. And right now they need us more than ever. So, I guess my hope, especially with the new Common Ground structure, is that the student athletes will have the support that they need to be able to create this environment at their institutions and help more young people that are just like them. And the last thing I'll say is each and every one of us has some kind of positional power. This webinar is really centered or geared towards administrators and maybe some coaches. So, it's so important that in this moment, we don't disassociate ourselves from the pain that our young people are feeling and walk around it, but instead we walk through it and in some cases lead them through it. And so I just, I just want to thank you for listening, and I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend, Pat Griffin.
Hello, everybody. My name's Pat Griffin, and my pronouns are she and her. And my task today is to sort of wrap this up and look forward, looking at what the future of Common Ground is. And we've got a couple of really significant changes that we're making that I want to describe to you. After 5 annual Common Ground gatherings, the leadership team is reassessing the future of Common Ground based on 2 major factors. One is the current situation we're in as we face the challenges with the coronavirus pandemic and the changes that's required in how we conduct not only our professional lives, but our personal lives. And the second factor is the results of a survey that we sent out to past Common Ground participants to try to understand more about the impact that Common Ground had on them as individuals and on their athletic departments and institutions. So first of all, in responding to COVID-19, a gathering of 60 or 70 people for an in-person Common Ground is not safe or financially feasible for the foreseeable future. So rather than cancel, what we've chosen to do is to see this as an opportunity to be creative in rethinking a Common Ground meeting. So we're planning to host a virtual Common Ground meeting using one of the several platforms that are available. And I think these platforms provide several options for how we can organize a group meeting in which participants can join the meeting from their home institutions. And we hope to be able to meet most of our goals in this interactive virtual space. So rather than planning for our usual 2-day event in late October or early November, which was when we have typically held our Common Ground meetings, we're targeting a series of dates in February and March for our virtual Common Ground program. This delay in timing will give the leadership team some time to refine the changes in our plans necessitated by moving from a face-to-face meeting to a virtual meeting. So Common Ground 6 will take place in February or March 2021 in a virtual format. The second part is responding to the past participant survey of our Common Ground participants and what their experiences in Common Ground have been. After looking at the results of the survey, 2 responses sort of jumped out at us. One was that participants' individual experiences of being a part of Common Ground and interacting with each other across differences of sexual orientation and gender identity and religion and race and division and kind of schools was a great experience, a positive experience that many participants even described as transformative. So that was the good news. The other thing that we learned in looking at the survey was that despite our inclusion of action ideas and action planning as a part of Common Ground, few participants actually initiated actions on their campus to create a more inclusive environment for student athletes or staff, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or religious beliefs. So our challenge for future Common Ground events is to continue to plan an experience that stimulates personal transformation, provides information and encourages relationships across differences, and empowers and supports participants to be able to go back to their home institutions better prepared to take action. So our plan is that rather inviting individuals to attend Common Ground, we will be inviting schools to apply as teams. We'll invite each school to identify a team of 4 people who will participate in the virtual Common Ground together. Those team members can include athletic or other institutional administrators, coaches, or other athletic staff, and student athletes. And we will ask those school teams to meet prior to participating in the virtual Common Ground to sort of get to know each other as a team, participate in Common Ground, and then have follow-up meetings at their institution or virtual meetings if that's necessary. And the focus of those teams will be to determine what actions are most appropriate to take in their institution. And each school team will be supported by one member, or at least one member of the leadership team, who will follow up with them and help them as they plan the actions that they plan to take on their campuses. The applications for participating in this virtual Common Ground in teams by school will be available on the NCAA website sometime this fall, and it's open to any school that would like to apply. Our hope with these changes is to maintain the personal impact of Common Ground on participants and to improve the support that we can provide to athletic departments to make institutional changes on their campus that are led by each of the school teams that will be participating. If you'd like more information about Common Ground, please contact Jean Merrill at the NCAA Office of Inclusion. One of the things I just wanted to say as I end is that for me, as a lesbian, my participation in Common Ground has been transformative. I talked about other participants' transformation. I feel like one of the things that has had such an incredible impact on me is that I have made friends not only among the leadership team, people like Skip and Gary and Liz, but other participants who come, people that I never knew, never thought I would know, much less care about, love, and respect. And that's the value of Common Ground. That's the magic of Common Ground in many ways, is that despite some really fundamental differences that we have among us, we are able to find that common space that centers on love and respect and try to work on inclusion from that space rather than from the larger cultural push for us to be divisive and work on from a space of hate or misunderstanding. And I can't think of a process that I've ever been involved in that did that as well as Common Ground. So I am committed to this process and committed to the people that I work with in that space. Jean, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Pat, and thank you to all my friends on the call today. Really appreciate your candid and sincere remarks. This is just the tip of the iceberg. These conversations literally can last days, weeks, years. So hopefully you've been able to get some good information in about the volume of a thimble. But it's a great chance for us to get in front of so many folks today. We have a few minutes for Q&A. We've had a few folks submit some questions already. One question came in. There was reference to core identity, and there was a question about can somebody expound on that a little bit? Can you explain what you mean by core identity? And Skip, or actually, Skip? Were you going to take that one? No.
I can
Liz was, thank you.
Yeah, so in speaking about core identities, and I don't remember if it was Nevin or Gary that I first heard talk about it, but those two dear friends come to mind when we talk about it. Think of, we all have various parts of our identity that are part of who we are. There are some things that are absolutely core, that are fundamental to how we see the world. Maybe it's kind of the first lens through which we see the world. Me as a person of faith, that is a core identity to me. Being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a disciple of Jesus Christ. That is my first lens through which I see the world. It's something core about me that is unchanging, is that faith for me. But that's just one part of my identity. There are many others. Nevin has led us in a really, and Nevin, do you want to talk about the really great exercise to help student athletes realize some of their different identities and then what might be core for them? Nevin, go ahead and pipe in if you want, but it's a good exercise for all of us to go through to recognize for us as we all have many parts of our identity, but for us, what is most core, what is fundamental to who we are. And so then anytime we're having a conversation about those core identities, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion certainly are three, race, then those conversations are going to be sensitive because it's something that is so much a part of who we are. It is absolutely a core part of who we are. And so of course it's going to be something that we're all very passionate about when we speak about it. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that.
I think you did a great job explaining it, Liz. You know, I think part of the challenge, especially when it comes to those core identities, is how we experience the world, you know, based off of certain ways in which we're privileged and ways in which we're not. And, you know, I feel like a lot of young people, especially, you know, if they're LGBTQ and they are part of a community of faith, a lot of times they don't see their likeness in the people who may make up the majority of the community, you know, even though their religious identity is a part of their, you know, core identity as well. And so, you know, making room for identities that we might not necessarily hold ourselves, but that those in our community hold is extremely important. And the other piece too, you know, when we talk a lot about the conversations around LGBTQ and religion and really finding common ground, is a lot of young people are in these spaces where they experience a lot of fear and shame. And when we think about their ability or inability to really hide or run away when they're scared, you know, a lot of them can't. You know, they live in this space every single day. Even young people of color, when they feel threatened, they can't get away. So I think the opportunity is those of us with more privileged identities, is even when we're uncomfortable, even when we don't know exactly what to say, is just recognizing it's still a choice to be able to walk away. And if we're going to lead, especially from a position of privilege, and use that or leverage that privilege to support the people around us, we got to stay there in solidarity and really be able to lean into that discomfort a little bit more so that we can, you know, support these young folks when they need us the most.
Question came in, any tips on how to approach conversations with student athletes who, you know, may have really good intentions, but have been taught some ignorant worldviews, perspectives, when it comes to things like race, sexual orientation, gender identity, perhaps from their parents or their communities. Anyone, Skip, you were going to take that one?
Yeah, I'd give a little bit of a try, because I think it speaks a bit to me. I'm a good way down the road in my life, and yet I'm sure I'd still do a lot of things that people could think of as ignorant. And there've been a lot of people who have been very patient and very respectful and very understanding in terms of how they've dealt with me, how they've handled me, how they've interacted with me. And when I say the wrong thing or I express the wrong belief, they engage me. They, as I said with the leadership team earlier, they stay at the table. They don't walk away from me. There's a confidence in my relationship with them that they're going to ask me important questions. They're going to ask those questions in respectful ways. They're going to engage me in dialogue in ways that bring me along a step at a time and help me to grow. There's a ton of resources out there, all the way from consultants and people on this team and other folks outside of this group that do wonderful work in this area, books, mentors, being a mentor, taking a person like that under your wing and maybe helping them to understand. But then one other thing I think that I would touch on in those conversations, as you get to a point where you're able to help a person regardless of which side that ignorance is on, because the ignorance can come from both sides, right? I mean, extreme ignorance can come from either direction, and helping those people to understand a little bit more about the concept of pluralism, in the sense that regardless of what our core identities are, as Liz and Nevin so wonderfully described, no matter what our core identities are, we need to be able to come together in the world and live together, and in a way that we can all flourish and thrive in our interactions with one another. And one of the things that's sort of cool to me is I get to know more and more people, and as I look and study more and more, I know a bit more obviously about my own faith tradition, but many faith traditions teach a concept of love of the other, or service to the marginalized, love and welcoming of the marginalized, and so forth. And so I think you tie that concept of pluralism together with sort of that overarching concern for making people feel welcome, that especially if that ignorance comes from the faith side, which is very possible in certain times, I would confess, at least if I'm any example of it, that being able to tap into your faith says it's important to make folks welcome and to reach out and to serve and to give and to consider others as more important than yourself, kind of thing. And so maybe emphasizing that point would be useful.
Thanks, Skip. Another question that came in: what is the most effective and efficient way that we can train more people who are looking to learn and are interested in advancing their knowledge on current social topics? Anybody want to take that one?
Use this, you take this back, Gene, and use this as a little bit of a advertisement for the series that you guys have coming up.
Yeah, well, since you're opening that door for me, Skip, I'll certainly walk through it. So, yeah, it's really making sure that the people that are in your circle of influence are able to access information that can inform them. A lot of people, again, talking about what's happening right now, people are feeling overwhelmed with where do I find information? And so as best as you can to at least get people started on some resources, and then they can continue to do self-education and self-exploration and kind of carving their own trail of interest and inquiry. I think that's really important. What the Office of Inclusion at the NCAA is doing is, because we unfortunately had to cancel the in-person inclusion forum in Denver, we've committed to doing a 5-part summer series of inclusion forum webinars. So our Office of Inclusion has 5 areas of inclusion: disability, international, LGBTQ, race and ethnicity, and women. And so we are going to be doing, over the course of the summer, 1 webinar in each of those core areas. So this is actually the launch of that series. So this is being recorded intentionally so that as you have watched this and it becomes posted online, you can share that with others. And we certainly encourage you to do that, and looking for other areas where there's great information.
I think it's also important to note that effective and efficient is great, and we do want to be efficient, or we certainly want to be effective. But the word efficient is maybe what I'm caught on, because a lot of these topics is a journey of lifelong learning, right? And when we know better, we do better. But there's continually more for us to learn and room for us to grow in our in our conversations and in how we interact with a lot of these topics. And so, you know, keeping in mind how we have learning differences and how some people may experience, you know, great change through having face-to-face conversations. Other people may feel more comfortable reading a book or watching a documentary or watching a YouTube, you know, series on something. So I think the best approach is actually a multifaceted approach in making sure that we are embedding inclusion, embedding these conversations, or embedding these topics in all of our conversations, in all of our approach. So just as we wouldn't want to just make this, you know, at colleges and universities, I always have an issue as a trans person when they bring in one trans speaker during Trans Day of Awareness and never talk about trans topics throughout the rest of the academic year, right? We want to make sure that this is part of the ongoing evolving curriculum. And so whatever that looks like for your department, for your interactions with your student athletes, is making sure that we're talking about it at team meetings, that we're talking about it when we are on a bus, and when we are talking about it in casual conversations, that we are peppering in these topics to make sure that we're giving our student athletes and our coaches and anybody else that we're in, you know, in our circle, as Jean mentioned, this sort of 360 opportunity to receive these learnings, because there are a lot of times where we can hear a message, and it just takes us to be in the right space on the right day for it to actually land and stick for us. And so I think, you know, as we're seeing right now, there's sometimes a time span of how many times we can throw something at the wall before it sticks. And we want to make sure that you know, there is the efficiency part of that, right? What is the most effective way to say the information so that people actually digest it? But I think that that's going to vary and be different based on your individual circumstances and probably your relationship with that person as well. So I would just encourage to offer as many resources as you can. And just as an example right now, elevating the voices of people within those communities that you're not, that you cannot speak for. And so, you know, saying right now, like, I'm trying to elevate Black voices because I can't speak to that experience. And I want, you know, I want to make sure that I'm learning from folks who have lived without putting the pressure on them to explain to me. And so that's another thing, right, of not putting a person in a position to be tokenized, but to, as Gary mentioned earlier, you know, to listen and to speak less and to listen more, and have that be a part of the learning as well.
Thank you, Chris, so much. We've got a couple minutes left, and I want to end on a question around hope and optimism, because we have to keep hope. We have to stay optimistic. And so my question, and I'll open it up to anyone, Pat and Gary, I don't think you all have had a chance to speak during the Q&A, but, you know, when setbacks occur, when progress seems slow, what keeps you optimistic? What gives you hope?
I have to admit that in times like these, my optimism goes up and down. And I think one of the things that it's been important to me to do is to acknowledge that that happens. I mean, we're dealing in our larger culture with huge issues of divisiveness, misunderstanding, and hatred and oppression. And those are feeling caught up in all of those large topics. It's easy to, I think, say, well, what can I possibly do? This is so big. What difference can I make? And I think the responsibility, and also what provides hope for me, is to identify what I can do in my circle. You know, whether I'm a coach with my team, or with my colleagues, or with friends and family. What can I do to encourage conversations and more understanding as a way to maintain hope? So it's, rather than sitting back and getting sunk in that, and sometimes it's not easy. I feel like what gives me hope is when I can make myself move, when I can feel like in my spheres of influence that I can say and do things that encourage all of us to be action-oriented, to take action. And the other thing that sustains me in terms of my hope is my friends on the leadership team. Because I know it's possible to create relationships across differences. and respect those differences, and at the same time move together toward creating a better world. Specifically, we're talking about athletics right now, but creating a more inclusive world for all of our athletics, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, race, whatever differences we bring to athletics. It's possible because I see it happen every time the leadership team gets together.
I let Pat go first because I wanted to think through this, because I want to be careful about how I express this, because my hope is a very personal thing. My hope is in an unchanging God who is sovereign over everything. And yet I know not everyone shares that belief. And so I don't want to get on a pulpit here and preach, but that is where my hope is. I think it was Monday night, I walked out into my driveway and it was eerily quiet because we had a curfew here in LA County. And we've had the pandemic that's been going on for 3 months, and now we'd had a week of intense unrest. And I just remember thinking, Lord, where's this all going? And for the first time in a long time, my knees kind of buckled. And I say buckled in terms of hope of where we're going as a country. I'm disturbed at things that I hear coming out of Washington, D.C. I'm disturbed at where we're going politically. I'm disturbed at where we are socially. And certainly I'm disturbed where we are from a medical health standpoint. And that was the first time in a long time that I felt my knees buckle. But I also believe this: there's nothing new under the sun. That if we look at history, man has gone through some of these issues that we're going through before, and man has come through this. My hope, I guess, and I'm going to go back to what Pat has said. In our leadership group, there is a wide variety of viewpoints and philosophies and thoughts of how life should be lived. And yet there has developed amongst us a love and a care for one another. And I think that's within all of us. Right now, there's a lot of hurting people who want to be heard. And are we giving them that voice, and are we listening to them? I think back to a prior question, and I guess one of the things I've learned through all of this is, and I go back to what I said, being quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, but asking questions that allow people to speak, and questions that aren't judgmental in how they're presented, questions that are truly about a deep inquiry of how we want to know each other, that will help create a perspective of people. So I guess that's where my hope is. We're going to survive this. It's hard, it's painful. I do believe there's going to be change, but it's slow and it's hard, and we have to persevere. But I do think that perseverance tests us and makes us more mature and complete. And I believe that we'll come, I don't want to say come through this, but we will improve and get better along the way. But I think of so much it has to do with the dialogue and the conversation, and willing to sit across the table and engage and listen and value the other person's viewpoint, even if we don't agree with it, giving it value.
Thank you so much, Pat and Gary, for the last remarks. I recognize we are a few minutes past the hour, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. If you have any interest in learning more about the Common Ground Initiative, certainly go to ncaa.org, to our inclusion webpage, and from there you can find Common Ground resources. You can find our leadership team roster, annual reports, multiple resources that are listed on this slide. Thank you all so much for your interest in Common Ground and your commitment to celebrating the diversity of the world around us. Please take good care of yourselves, and please be in touch. Thank you, friends. Bye-bye.